Master of Business Management degree with specialization in Earth and Space Health System Management from the Military College of Vermont College, where he was a NASA Scholar in Residence. He holds the Doctor of Philosophy degree in Environmental Studies from the Union Institute and University of Cincinnati, Ohio, with specialization in bioremediation and concentration in biodefense. Let me stress that Dr. Joe is a NASA fellow and have 7 inventions that he developed for NASA. And that 7 invention, perhaps Dr. Joe can explain a little bit about that during the presentation. So without further much ado, we would like to call Dr. Joe to give the talk.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Joe Resnick, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and accolade. Let's just briefly hit a little bit of my background to supplement what the good doctor had mentioned. I've been a consultant to NASA for over 35 years. I'm sort of in semi-retirement from there now, particularly since the space shuttle fleet has come to its end-of-life mission. But I did consult. I had 7 of my inventions at the Kennedy Space Center from 1985 through 1996. So if you visited Kennedy during those years and saw the moon rocks, then you saw my inventions walk past them. This morning, I'm going to give you a talk about degradation of petroleum hydrocarbons with organisms encapsulated in wax. Now, what you see on the screen is a... good morning, Professor Abdullah. Thank you for coming. What you see on the screen is the commonly known as the European honeybee, or more commonly known as the Russian honeybee. This is a Russian species. And you'll notice the shape of the cone that this type of bee produces. Now, before we go any further, and I want to just do this. As some of you walked in, you saw my assistant and Marwan blowing these bubbles. Now there's a reason for that. This isn't kindergarten. This is space science. And as I get deeper into this talk, this meaning will become more apparent to you. So why don't we begin? Degradation of petroleum hydrocarbons with organisms encapsulated in wax. Well, where can we use things like that? In 1989, there was a tremendous oil spill happened in Valdez, Alaska. At the time, I was NASA scholar at Vermont College and working on a project for NASA. I was called in to design a method, a quick fix. In science and out in industry, the key word is quick fix. Fix it fast, get it cleaned up, and that was the order of the day. So I came up with a way to encapsulate. At that time I was working on other projects related to microencapsulation. I came up with a way to encapsulate pseudomonads and organisms in a substance, beeswax. Now, beeswax is a fantastic molecule. I call it God's molecule. And those were used in typical spills that you see here, such as the BP Horizon and the big spill with the Alyeska pipeline, and it all started with the Valdez crash. What you're seeing here, and I'm just going to let this run, is the BP Horizon. And oil spills have far-reaching consequences, and these consequences are harmful to people, to fishes, to land animals, to sea life. They impact local economies, global economies, of course, phylogeny and ontogeny. Our children cause genetic disorders, loss of life and property, have global climate impact, result in deforestation, and it overall affects the environment. So, I came up with this method, and this is the abstract from the actual US patent and global patents that issued. There were, I think, 23 patents issued just on this one patent. And of course, in the 144 countries that are party to the WAPTC, International Cooperation Act. Organisms that degrade hydrocarbon substances were encapsulated in wax to form what we called organism-containing microshells. Remember the little bubble that you saw a few minutes ago? What we were able to do is to take a slurry of pseudomonads, and these are organisms that have a voracious appetite for hydrocarbon-based substances and long-chain hydrocarbon molecules typically found in crude oil substances and diesel fuels. The significance of using pseudomonads is that they are benign both to the environment and to man. You can put these things on you and they don't hurt you. They're non-pathogenic to man. So I identified a species of Candida, the Candida lipolytica strain 10, and mixed that with a slurry of other pseudomonads comprising nematodes, tardigrades, and rotifers, and we put them in a solution of nutrient and put them inside these little wax balls. And once we expose the wax to the water and the oil, it forms a whole new matrix, and it stops the oil spill from spreading. One of the professors in my master's program was Taylor G. Wang, Dr. Wang. Terrific guy, fine scientist, NASA JPL scientist. He was the developer of what's called, and some of you may have encountered this, but if you haven't, you will in the future. It's called Wang's constant. And I didn't put a slide up here, but you can look up Wang's constant. Wang's constant is demonstrated by taking one drop of oil and dropping that drop of oil, theoretically, on a pond. And the rate at which that oil disperses is tremendous. It's not as fast as the speed of light, but the only thing that makes it slower is wave and energy action. So if you take a drop of oil and you drop it on a pond, it'll cover that pond with, and just depending on, let's say it's a 20-acre pond, it'll cover that 20-acre pond probably within 2 minutes. A sheen will develop on that whole pond. So when you have an event such as an oil spill, Valdez or wherever, it's important to stop the spread of the sheen as quickly as possible. So the order of the day is to come up with a way to immobilize the sheen, bind the hydrocarbons, but at the same time you bind them, you have to start cleaning them. So this is what this technology did. I came up with the molecule beeswax, and that's a whole story in itself of how I came to determine beeswax. I was actually on my back porch one day eating a jelly sandwich while I had just received this task order to come up with a new way to clean up oil spills. So I'm sitting on my back porch and I was eating a piece of toast with jelly on it, and I dropped a piece of jelly and there lands a bee on the jelly. And I thought to myself, you know, I've looked at everything else except beeswax, and I said to myself, beeswax, hydrophobic, oleophilic, it might work, we need to run it through the machine. So I acquired a quantity of the beeswax substance, and of course beeswax has a phase change at about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's an ideal molecule for use in my encapsulation instrument that I designed. So I got some of this stuff and I put it together, and it resulted in the filing of the US patent 5807724, which is about to expire next year, by the way, which is one of the reasons I'm developing next generation oil spill cleanups to keep the patent going and keep the patent application in force, and to keep commerce from free trade. So the history of the development of my microspheres, remembering those little bubbles that I blew, in '89 I began working with NASA scientists, Dr. Wang at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and with scientists at Marshall Space Flight Center and at Lehigh University. I had the pleasure to work with R. Buckminster Fuller, Dr. Fuller, who's passed away, was one of the mentors in my master's program. Dr. Fuller was the inventor of the geodesic dome and the discoverer of nanoparticles. In 1990, I began to design the first device for use in space, where we made the first micro balloons, typically just like the ones that you've seen here, but only very, very small. And I was part of STS-41 and Space Shuttle Transport Service Mission 43, where we actually developed the first microbeads in space. And there's a history in NASA. If you want to find out more about that, you can just Google Dr. Resnick, STS-41, Space Mission, and you'll find all that stuff. 1990, we made the first successful production of microspheres in space aboard STS-41. 1991, we did STS-43, and spin-off from that technology, we developed the microshells for beeswax and oil spills, and the first deployment was at Wolf Island in Prince William Sound, Alaska. 1993, and you can see that there's a life cycle to this R&D cycle, and R&D from the time that you come up with an idea. Maybe some of you folks have ideas or may develop new ideas for new products based on what you're going to see here this morning. So if that happens to you, just be cognizant of the life cycle of your product. And it does take a while to get your product from your drawing board. For example, this started with drawings. You saw that first drawing in a prior slide where it was just one bubble with that showed a matrix with a bubble within inside a bubble. It does take some time to move that technology and transition it from the laboratory through R&D, through testing, through certification, and then into the real world for general use. Life cycle like that, it could take as long as 3 years. I've done some projects in a lot less time. I've done some projects in 6 months. Some I'm still working on for 20 years because of other factors like technolag. The technology I need to bring that project out doesn't exist yet. When it does exist, I plug it in, boom, there's that project. So, but in 1993, my products entered the global economies. And the product went from the space shuttle to use on oil spills, and most recently we sold a bunch of stuff and used tons and tons of material in the BP Horizon spill. And the material is made of powdered beeswax, and we make booms, bio socks, polysword, microsword, PRP, Wapid, well booms, and oil buster. We've developed a bunch of different products. So in your own work, in your laboratory, keep in mind that each product or each process that you're developing has facets that could be turned into viable products that people will sell or people will buy from you and buy from the university. With a view toward, in my own work, when I start a project, I have the person already identified whom I wish to sell that product to. So I work specifically on providing that solution for that person who has that need. And by and large, it's been very, very successful for me. So we started aboard STS-41. We went through a developmental cycle and, of course, rigorous testing. And the first use was the Exxon Valdez spill that occurred in Prince William Sound, Alaska in March of 1994. The tanker ran aground on Bly Reef, and it was headed for Long Beach, California, by the way. And it spilled about 750,000 barrels of crude oil into the bay. It caused a lot of damage. In fact, that type of spill and where it occurred, the beach matrix in Alaska is not like the typical beach that we have here. In Alaska, you have what's called an inverted beach, whereas the large particulate is distributed on the top, and as you progress downward into the strata, the strata gets thinner and smaller until you reach sand. In other words, you've got these big boulders deposited first, then smaller rocks and smaller rocks, smaller and smaller, until you reach sand. So this was not like a beach we have here where the beach is deposited, it might go maybe 3 or 4 inches deep and settles and you can handle the cleanup pretty well. the cleanup in Valdez was very, very difficult simply because of the matrix. So you had big stones mixed in with little stones, all of them covered with oil, impossible to move all of the stones. So what I came up with and what we discovered was my microcapsules with the oil-eating organisms inside of them provided the perfect mechanism and delivery system to treat that type of matrix. Now, that's important to consider in treating oil spills because we can step back and say, okay, what other kind of difficult places where we can't get in there with bulldozers, it's economically not feasible to go in and clean up a place, it's too cost prohibitive, too many man hours, people could get hurt. Where are other such places? Well, if you go back to our little arboretum in the back of the school here near the canal, you can see mangroves. You can see the mangroves forest and the mangrove swamp back there. Typically, when oil is spilled in a mangrove, that mangrove is gone. But with this product, we're able to save mangroves. We're able even to treat, this is, you people will appreciate this, beaver dams. Have you ever seen the construction of a beaver dam? It's got thousands of little sticks that this animal uses to build a hut over in a dam. So there are instances that we participated in cleanup where we actually take this material that I invented, we apply it to the beaver dams and to the dens, they call it a den, or a tent, a beaver den, beaver tent, and the material literally takes the oil and breaks the oil down, and the beavers come back and the land is restored and the place becomes pristine. But our first use of that product was at Exxon Valdez, and this is a micrograph or a graph of showing the extent of the devastation that the Exxon caused. The products I developed, this is one of them that's characterized here in the drawing. You see the sphere on the left. It has a solid outer core that's made out of beeswax, and with the instrument that I designed, I'm able to put nutrients, micronutrients, and organisms within the core of that microcapsule. Now, during manufacture, with the instrument that we hope to locate here and create a new department here for nano micro biotechnology and microencapsulation, we're able to take and place literally anything that we can liquefy inside a core. And in my experiments in the last 20-some years, I haven't found any material yet that I'm not able to work with. And that includes high temperature polymers, high temperature plastics, low temperature phenols, resins. Just I've experimented with a variety of different substances, alginates, those sorts of things. Biocompatible materials that would allow us to isolate an organism and provide an interface or a delivery system of the material being encapsulated into a species requiring that food over a time release. So in some of your work, if you're working in microalgae or some of those conditions where you might need a time release mechanism to culture a specific organism within a time frame. I'm aware of one of our colleagues here concentrates on feeding an organism in a certain time window, and you can only feed that organism at a certain time window. So a delivery system of this nature, wherein we can control the breakdown of the core for a specific release time module, that would be excellent for application in his particular area of development and work. But what I was able to do was to develop this, we call it PRP, which stands for Petroleum Remediation Project. It's hydrophobic and oleophilic. Of course, hydrophobic, water off. Oleophilic, it binds with the oil. Non-toxic, non-hazardous, stimulates the indigenous microorganisms. I don't know if you knew this, but in nature, this planet is so amazing. Everything that we really need to take care of the planet is already out there. We just have to configure it and use and turn it into what we need to turn it into to make it work for what we want it to work for. In the case of indigenous organisms, if you think about oil production and oil spills in general, the Earth has its own natural releases of oil every day that are, of course, unreported by newspapers and media. Probably about 200,000 gallons of crude oil and gas escape every day just from what's called natural venting. So the Earth and nature in its, in its magnificence has developed a way to take care of that sort of thing at sea. And it's these organisms that are proliferate throughout all the aquatic environments that eat oil. And these are the pseudomonads, these are the primary producers, secondary producers, but they're all out there and they eat oil. So what I was able to do was to capitalize on the fact that, okay, we've already got oil eaters out there, how can we stimulate them even further to eat more oil? And one mechanism to do that was to use this universal molecule that is literally a food source for everything on the planet. Every species, anything you can think of, can use beeswax as a food source. It's just, I call it God's molecule because I found it to have application and ramification and impact on every area of science in which I've been involved over the last 40 years. So I came up with PRP and Oil Buster, and during the testing up in Wolf Island, it was actually a field test, and it was the first deployment. And then after we found out, hey, this stuff looks pretty good. Look, it looks like it's working. On the top of the slide, you'll see a graph that shows the breakdown of the component elements in the hydrocarbon. That would be the high-dense aliphatics, the VOCs, voltaic organic compounds, that sort of thing. And it shows what happens if, for one section of the spill, where there was no biodegradation, and the loss was due to volatility, that off-gas, the stuff off-gas. We did this in Wolf Island in September 2001. Now, we treated an area up there approximately the size of 4 acres along a beach. And if you can imagine the inverted beach matrix up there, the beach structure with these large stones on the top, smaller gravel progressing downward into sand. So the delivery system was, and method, we used a spray. We put the PRP material inside seawater at temperature, at ambient temperature, mixed that, and then sprayed it on the rocks. And because of the content of the PRP, and the beeswax is 18% hydrocarbon. So what happens is when you expose the hydrocarbon to any like molecule, including this spilled oil, it clings to it and binds to it. Once it binds to it, it begins to break down, and it releases the organisms to the point where it starts to break down the oil. And it spurs the indigenous oil eaters there to come into a feeding frenzy. It really is a slick system. But with the PRP treated spill, you can see the dramatic increase in numbers in terms of effectively cleaning up spilled hydrocarbons. And keep in mind that once you put this stuff in place, you don't have to go back and clean it up. There's not going to be any. This is the environmental cleanup. This is it. It's not like using booms. It's not like using pads, because once you use the booms, okay, what do you do with the boom after it's full of oil? Well, you have options. You can crush the oil out of it, but then you have to still dispose of the booms in a landfill because they're contaminated. With this technology, basically, I'm like everybody else. I'm lazy. I don't want to work. These organisms are the same way. And all they want to do is eat and live their life cycle, and that's it. So, in devising this thing and this technology, in keeping in mind that I really don't want to work that hard either, and I want to save the environment, I want to eliminate the environmental stressors, I came up with this way to do it, and it's through use of that molecule, that beeswax molecule. So in other words, you put this material on an oil spill and you walk away. You come back in 6 weeks and you do your testing, you do your sampling. Guess what? Aliphatics are down to what? 97% decrease in aliphatics, 78 or 76% decrease in the aromatics. So, and that's only in, what was this? I think this was what, 4 weeks or 45, I think it's 4 weeks or 45 days. Generally, within the first 30 days, you see dramatic results, as I'll show you in one of the subsequent slides. And the way that this bioremediation works, wax microshells are exposed to the hydrocarbons and they create a new chemical matrix, which is unique in itself. The microshells bond with the long-chain hydrocarbon molecules on contact, so they bond it. That's really important if you have a release of free product in any type of oil and land structures as well, because it stops the migration of a plume. If you can catch it soon enough, put this material on it and it will migrate. This material will migrate. The heavier it becomes, the more dense it becomes, and it will migrate into a sand matrix. Bonding is due to the differences in surface tension between the free product and the shell of the microcapsule. That is, I'd like to give a lecture on that sometime. That's related to my discovery in this process of development of what's called the phenomenon of material transfer, which I'll speak to a little bit later. Encapsulated organisms feed from additional food sources, hydrocarbons producing CO2 and water. This is called mineralization. When you want to clean up an oil spill, what you're looking for with that hydrocarbon molecule is called mineralization. Mineralization is the breakdown of that substance or any substance into its elemental fractions, CO2, water, trace elements. That's what we're looking for, and that's what we need to achieve when we're cleaning up oil spills or cleaning up any type of waste. A chemical bond stops water, or stops migration of the free product, and it stimulates growth because of the beeswax shell to the indigenous aquatic and land-based ecotypes, and mineralization in the spilled oil occurs. This phenomenon again is called material transfer. That's another thing you might want to look up that I've done. I wrote a paper on material transfer and presented that some years ago at the National Oil Spill Response School in Corpus Christi, Texas. Field applications, these are just two examples of field applications of this technology. Excuse me. I went to a place in Mexico called Villahermosa, and this is operated by Pemex Corporation, which is owned by the Mexican national government. And this place had been polluted for 45 years. And they were somewhat skeptical at first, and they said, okay, if you can clean up this spot, you can clean up every spot we have here in Mexico and on the Yucatan. And so we said, okay, well, we want your worst spot. And they said, well, this is it. I said, okay, we'll take your challenge. So the picture on the left is before treatment. 45 days after treatment, there's the matrix of the sand soil in Villahermosa after 45 days. After 45 days, I don't even think we could get a reading on the aliphatics, or it was gone, completely gone. Another case example is the Black Lagoon in Abu Dhabi. In Abu Dhabi, they're real funny about protecting their oil wells over there. And I had to convince the Ministry of the Interior over there that if we released this product, that it wouldn't climb down and go down into the sand and eat all the oil reserves. And I told him, sir, it doesn't work that way. It won't work that way. But they were decidedly convinced that could happen. So that sort of stopped us from doing some things in Abu Dhabi for a while. But they gave us this place it's called the Black Lagoon. And it, too, had been polluted, I think, since before World War II. This place, they had been taking oil out of this. I can't even say the name of where it was. I just I knew it as the Black Lagoon in Abu Dhabi. I went there 4 times to do the sampling, to do the original application. I spent a total of about 12 days there. But on the rendering on the left shows what it looked like before treatment, and it was nasty. It really was nasty. After treatment, after 65 days, we had ducks. We had waterfowl. We had tadpoles coming back into this place, so after 65 days. And it was real impressive, and needless to say, we did get a big contract, and all this material, the biobooms, the biosocks, it's on all the ships from Abu Dhabi and over in Saudi Arabia. They use all this stuff now. And it hasn't migrated yet down into the oil wells and gone into the reserves. But I wanted to touch on this and share this with you all. Each of you is working on something that is critical and vital to humanity. And in your own way and in your own field, you are a premier scientist. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, believe me. You know, they just don't give these positions that we're holding away. You must have earned it to get to where you are. But in the course of your development and your research, you know, I personally, in doing my projects, was always thinking about, okay, what am I going to do after this project? Who's going to use this? Who's going to buy it? What am I going to work on next? Am I going to file an invention? Am I going to have a patent? How long is this going to last? Am I going to make any money at all for anybody, or am I just wasting my time? And ultimately, I was able to answer those questions in very affirmative ways. And ways that I did that, and I want you to remember this about what you're working on now. Some of you are at the brink of making fantastic discoveries. I've been part of the evaluation process, and with a little guidance and encouragement, you can take that project and product to the next level where people will pay you for the rest of your natural life for that product. So, let me encourage you, and I'm not going to point any fingers to anybody, but let me encourage you to continue with that. And if you need my help or any of the other profs or department heads, come and ask us. But you're coming to the point in your work where you believe you have created something new and useful and meets the standard definition, and your thought level and process has risen to the level of invention. That's a very sacred place to me, very special place to be. When your thought processes and your work and your research, and you finally say, hey, I've got something here nobody else has. What am I going to do with it? When you reach that point, I want you to remember, and I'm going to give you a tip here, inventions must meet a standard. These standards, there are 3 of them: new, useful, and not obvious to persons of reasonable skill in the art. So if you can make those 3 standards with your invention, and I'm going to tell you a little secret of how you can do that with any of your inventions right below. These standards are met by the presentation of one material to another. Whatever you're working on right now, I guarantee you that if you file a patent application and you claim the ability to present one substance to another and use that language, you will get a patent. You will get a patent. Because the likelihood of someone doing what you're doing, working with your laboratory, using your cookie recipe, is so remote and infinitesimal that I would argue it doesn't exist. So whatever you're doing, whatever field of work in, it's algae, shrimp, whatever, the method of presenting one substance to another, you'll get a patent. And the way you do that, these standards are met by the presentation of one material to another. In my case, with oil spill cleanup, I got a claim allowed. It was in view of the difference of surface tensions between oil, water, and beeswax. So you can see the tie-in, the differences. So if you point that out to the patent examiner, he can't object to it. Can't reasonably object to that. And then I go deeper in, and I cite macroscopic, microscopic, molecular, or molar levels. Some of you folks are dealing with stuff that are very, very, very small organisms that use micronutrients. So keep in mind, as you're progressing with your work, you're going to find new and useful ways, and you need to file patents on that. And you're free to bring your patent ideas to UMT's patent attorneys anytime you want. They have an open door policy. They'd love to see you come up with something new. And they have a very liberal share policy for stuff that you develop. So let me encourage you. If you come up with something new, if you don't know what to do with it, come and see me. I'm accessible. You'll see, I'm hard to miss. You'll see me all over the campus. These standards are met on multiple levels when you're inventing things and coming up with new processes. And you want to make all of your work so that it can transition easily into the real world. Okay, let's move along. I want you to consider this. Biotechnology and application to other fields of research. Other areas of applied research that can benefit from the microencapsulation technology that I'm going to locate here: cell culture, adjuvant delivery systems, cosmetics, if you're working on cosmetics or you're thinking about a new facial cream. Maybe that new substance that you've come up with is a better way, or could be used as an adjuvant to speed wound healing or skin or burns or whatever. So be thinking about that. Pharmaceuticals, probiotic delivery systems. In the food sciences, new formulations for new kinds of foods. Marine ecology, plant microbes, microalgae defense. Someone in here is working on microalgae defense. Someone in the university that I just had spoken with some weeks ago. But the microencapsulation technology has a direct bearing on the work that that person is doing. Digital printing and digital foods. Huh? How about that? Digital printing and digital foods. No, it's for real. In last week's, I'm on one of these mailing lists from like Food Science Journal, and Nestle just spent $500 million to make a new kind of chocolate that's printed. And you can buy it. You can buy it in Hong Kong, and it comes in this neat little thing, and it looks like Rubik's Cube. And it's made out of sugar and chocolate, and it's printed food. And there's a laboratory up in Michigan where a professor is making printed meat, hamburgers. Huh? Hamburgers. Well, they have a problem with flavoring, but I've offered to help them deliver flavoring to their printed meat hamburgers. And their system is different. But that's just one thing where the opportunity to move your science from your laboratory into the real world, if you can meet someone's need, it certainly exists. Pardon me for jumping up and down, I get excited. Future fuels, next generation rocket fuels, I'm involved in that. We developed a next generation rocket fuel that burns clean, and we use beeswax and a synthetic wax, and it's nothing like the solid rocket propellant that they use today. Every time someone puts a satellite up, they put hundreds of millions of tons of dirt and debris into Earth's atmosphere. That's bad for all of us. You know, it hurts children and kittens too. So it's bad for us. We came up with a new way to develop next generation propulsion fuel called future fuels. And the result after ignition is CO2 and water. Very clean. And we won third place in NASA's Invent the Future contest last year, by the way, in 2013. Nanobiotechnology. Here's a good one for you. A lot of you are into the scientific end and research end very deeply. So, functional gene microarrays. Create your own functional gene microarrays with your own standard. Create your own standard, and guess what? If yours is better, people will use your standard. People will buy your kit. And you will make the money, and then in addition to that, you're helping humanity, because maybe you came up with that new assay that identifies a precursor to a clinical onset of some disease faster and better than anything else and cheaper. But you don't know unless you move it forward. Architecture, composite materials, microencapsulation is ideal for that type of use. New medicines, new pharmacology. Veterinary applications. We're working on veterinary applications as we speak, making new wound cure systems for injuries to animals, domestic animals, pets, and service dogs, and military dogs. Environmental cleanup, of course. Microencapsulation technology is certainly germane to that, and has been demonstrated over the last 15, 18 years to be very effective. So let's move on. Some other applications and products. In the United States, prior to joining the UMT staff, I was working on a project called LTIP. Let me move to that. And that it was a solution proposed for the colony collapse disorder that is absolutely rampant in Western civilization. In 1977, an infestation from the Isle of Wight, the actual tracheal and varroa mites that contaminated literally the rest of the Western culture and the Western world, the bee populations, feral bee populations, came from the Isle of Wight in the United Kingdom, 1977. So it took from 1977 up until about 2007 for the feral bee populations in the United States and in Canada to completely disappear. There are no more feral bees in the United States or in Canada. And to make matters worse, there's now this condition called colony collapse disorder, where the bees are just disappearing, they're abandoning their hives, and there are a number of factors. Some scientists believe it's due to excessive use of nicotinamides, which there's some credence to that, but we have some other theories that we think it has to do with a number of different problems. But I developed this one product called LTIP, which is the low toxicity integrated pest management product that uses these microcapsules that you see on the right there, and we're able to characterize. And at the present time, we use a diluted elemental component called tea tree oil, which is the melaleuca, which we have here. We have lots of that stuff here. So generally, the exposure to the tree tea oil is lethal to mites. It suffocates them. That's the mechanism of getting rid of the trachea and varroa mites. The material that we use creates an off gas, and the gas suffocates the mite. But we're going to be doing some other things here. The integrated pest management product certainly has application here in Malaysia based on some new things that I've been involved with, dealing with the Melipona, the stingless bee populations, which we're going to look at in the future. But I wanted to share that with you so that you see that microencapsulation in my own work. Not only am I involved in oil spill cleanups, but I'm involved with taking care of honeybees, new food products, adjuvants, drug delivery systems, and you know, I'm just one guy, and there's a whole room full of scientists in here, so each one of you has your particular expertise that might be able to be benefited by use of or integration of this technology. So the folks in charge here wanted you all to be aware of this. I just wanted to share this last thing because we're almost finished. This will be my last slide. We take technology from the space shuttle and we gave it to the world, and this is one of the technologies that we developed. The product that we have out there and we're going to be developing is Contact 2, which is going to be using corn oil husks. We're going to be using palm oil and palm kernel waste as a bioaugmentation. You know, I don't know if you think about it, but every day here in Malaysia, where we have the crushing operations for palm oil, all of that excess biomass is not being used. It's being either dumped in the ocean or thrown by the side of the road, and that doesn't have to be that way. It could be used as a filler in our oil spill cleanup projects, because when you use that material, guess what happens? You get a brand new material. It's called a biofilm. We have looked at this material and this new biofilm, and we believe it's better than Teflon. Everybody knows what Teflon is, huh? How slippery it is and nothing sticks to it. You can heat it and do this. The material we think that we've discovered, and we haven't characterized it yet. That's what we're going to be doing here at our laboratories at IMB in the future. We're going to be able to tell the world what that material is, because we don't know what it is, but we know that if we take this stuff that they throw away, the palm fronds and all the result of the crushing, that they're just throwing in the garbage and throwing in the landfills, we can use that, and when we use it to clean up the oil spill, the stuff that comes off the oil spill is even more valuable and better than the stuff we put on the spill to clean the spill. That's how great nature is. So I want to encourage everyone to keep working on what you're working on, and if you see any connection at all with regard to this technology that I've just briefly described, And my publications, if you just go and do a Google search on me, you can find out publications and see a bunch of videos that show the microencapsulation, the machine, etc. And if you have any questions or you want to see me in my office, I have a new office over in the Ag Building on the 3rd floor. I'm generally there all the time, or you'll see me around on campus, and you can find me on the email, and I'm available. And I don't know if my number's been published over there yet. Marlon will take care of that. But I invite free and open discourse if I can help anyone. And I'd like to thank you all for attending this morning, and thank you very much. And if I'll open up for any questions, any Q&As. We have time. I didn't run over. I said 45 minutes. So we have, if anyone has any questions, I'll field them now. If not, or if you think of something later, please feel free to contact me. Email address is in the UMT system. I'm real easy to find. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.